All right, we're getting this started now. Ryan, thanks for coming. We'll probably wait a couple more minutes for people to join. Today I'm going to be looking at, I guess, kind of ruin construction really, and sort of the thought processes that I try to go through when I have to build things like this out of ruins. So there'll be some looking at photo reference. There'll be playing with the prototypes that Amelia gave for this assignment. And eventually, after we look at some examples, I'm going to try to start from a place of building more of an intact ruin, really. In fact, I won't even really be building it as a ruin at all. I'll just be building it as an intact architectural creation. And then from there, I'm going to work on sort of deconstructing it so that we at least, for some people, it can be overwhelming to have to build a ruin out of sort of nothing or out of a loose assembling of geometric shapes like the basis that was given for the assignment. So I'm going to try to, I'm going to try to hopefully help people think a little bit more about what the space looked like before it was destroyed. I'm also going to touch a little bit on sort of, I guess, fairly plausible methods of decay or representations of decay. We'll see how that goes. I'll do a little bit of that here. I might be going a little bit beyond, I guess, the number of prototypes we actually have to work with according to the rules of the assignment, but that won't really be my purpose in quite the same way. So yeah, so one of the things that we talked about in the assignment description was when we imagined where the out of this whole complex, like where was there a main entrance? Like you try to imagine the logical reality of the space. Like there had to be a main entrance, maybe a side entrance, maybe courtyards, gardens, that kind of thing. And it's interesting how I feel like 90-some% of people when they see this template that was supplied, they often think, and there's no right or wrong answer before I go into this, I just want to say that, but they often assume this is the main entrance. And I think it's because there's, you start seeing the patterns, even though this wasn't laid out specifically with any plan in mind, that was, relayed to the students who take this assignment. But I think that people see this formality here, they see this symmetry a little bit, and they end up thinking that this is the main entrance, which is interesting. I think it's also reinforced by this low wall right here. So it's cool how, like, in this assignment we're asked to create ways to articulate volumes using like lines created by walls, points created by maybe the columns of the broken columns, or even lines created through rows of broken columns. But we already see, like, there's already a bit of a pattern being created here by having these two square things and this one in the middle, like pushing forward. It makes us instantly imagine that there was an archway here to go through. I'm going to play through this in a way that's more unorthodox. Again, not necessarily right or wrong, but I'm going to pretend that the player enters. They would enter right here into the main entrance, and I'm going to move my character spawn over in this direction. We'll see how this goes. I haven't tried this before, so we'll see how this, if my thought process here can be made to work fairly well. One other thing I wanted to point out was when we start thinking about the original layout of the ruins, if I hide, let's see, if I hide this plane, we can see more just the foundation, and we can adjust it a little bit. we were given, amongst the limited number of prototypes, we were given, hi River, thanks for coming. We were given these floor plans. Quick recap for River. I'm going to be working on building a ruin, and I'm going to try to explain a little bit about how we can envision the way the ruin looked before it fell into ruin when it was an intact structure. So I'm going to try to do that here. Okay, so yeah, so this is a floor plane. Let me turn that back on. This one there, okay. And I think for the purposes of this, if we're trying to articulate like an architectural symmetry and clarity to things, you probably want to have your grid turned on, at least when you start blocking in things. That could make things a little easier for you when you're beginning. So I'm going to build upon this here. Just to get it started. I might just tweak that, pretend it's a little bit busted up. Okay, so that's fairly aligned. So I've already created like a new sense of symmetry, kind of. So yeah, there's some images I want to show at this point. Let's see. Yeah, this is my Pinterest page. I have some areas where I've marked some pictures of ruins, and the ones I find interesting, a lot of times if you look around, you can find artists' recreations of the way ruins looked in their original state. I think a lot of times the magazine National Geographic has done this over the years, but there's a lot of other images, especially now on the internet. They're kind of everywhere. But you start seeing things like help you imagine how things were. This is a good example here. This is some Roman ruins, and you can see the artist's representation on top. You can see how, like when this whole building, this whole temple was standing here on the left, ultimately, like today, all that's left standing is the front colonnade, the front facade of the building right there. And it looks like whatever this temple was is completely gone. But interestingly enough, this large building here, which had this really gorgeous facade with statuary and stuff like that, it looks like over time, like the foundations of the building are still there and were rebuilt, but you can tell like the building is still there, but it's completely unrecognizable at this point. So that's like one example. There was also, where was that other one? This is, yeah, I mean, maybe these aren't the best examples. I mean, the truth is like it depends how much you want your ruins to be ruined. And for our sake, I mean, we're going to maintain enough intact structures to support gameplay. Like that's going to be kind of our guiding principle here. Again, like in this, I don't know if this is outside the Colosseum or a Colosseum, but yeah, there was, I guess, the Temple of Apollo or something. And all that was left standing was like just a few pillars really, and maybe the foundation of the structure. So I guess you could say like if you only have that much left standing, and you want to articulate that, you could almost say that like if we do that in our level, if we try to represent something like that, we're doing like a vaguely articulated space, like we only maintain the most crucial elements for us to get a sense of what was originally there. So in other words, to say we build the facade and then oh, sorry. I just tapped the wrong button here. Yeah, what happened here? Oh, I hate when I do this. I just tapped one of the gizmo buttons and it just sent me into like 2D view, I think. There we go. Oh, hotkeys. They're our friend until they're not our friend. Okay, so let's see. So we in this case, if we only have so many, the nice thing about this exercise and this assignment is there's a finite number of pieces you can use to build your ruins, which is nice because it makes you be judicious about choosing only the ones that tell the best, that communicate the best and most important architectural information. So in other words, like here, we could say that it's most important that you can tell where maybe the original entrance was to this. So you space things out like this, and then you just build your entrance here. Let's see. So this kind of supports, this kind of thing definitely supports what we see a lot in ruins, like even in the pictures of ruins that Amelia gave us, which I'm going to pull up here. The ruins at Laodicea in Turkey. Yeah, we got a lot of this kind of thing where all that was left standing overhead, ceiling-wise, was often just the beams that were directly supported by the colonnade. So, I mean, this assignment was, it's important, like the photo reference is important, definitely, so that you can kind of maintain a certain amount of believability. It's also useful even for gameplay purposes. Like here we see a lot of times in ruins, there's the walls have crumbled to some degree and they're kind of low walls remaining. But you know, you could say for game mechanic purposes, these walls could be like crouch height cover or full height cover, and you can block out the ruined walls to suit the kind of gameplay you want. If you do need, like some people put in, they actually put in intact ceilings overhead. And although that's stretching, like it depends how old your ruins are too. Like these are obviously like 2,000+ year old ruins, so they're pretty decayed. But say for gameplay purposes, um, you needed there to be roof structures overhead. You have one of two options to sort of justify that in the level design and also like to the art department, which is going to have to build this thing and maintain a realistic environment when they build it. And that is, you could either put a ceiling in that was maybe put in later. Maybe it was constructed for more industrial, modern um, materials, and it was put in for some other purpose other than the original like temple structure. But if you do want to do little bits of ceiling, you have to be very careful, like how much you use. And again, I'm articulating the volume here by nature of, I'm echoing, you know, obviously the square shape of this foundation. So yeah, I'm going to take one of these planes here. Actually, I can take this one. This is fine. I'll just knock this back down to 1. So this here is like it makes sense architecturally. It stretches if this ruins are as old as we're saying they are, it stretches the limits of being credible. So what you could do instead is you could kind of, especially if you do this, and I see some people sometimes doing that. And yeah, this becomes very unbelievable that this could still remain standing in that way. But say you do have just maybe 3, like 1, 2, 3 support corners. Well, you could do a little trickery here. Turn off my grid snapping for a minute. You could try to make it a little more plausible if you mix it up a little like this. You could do something like that, where you sort of deconstruct the roof a little bit. Oops, that didn't go the way I wanted to. You could even kind of do something like that where you tell the story of most of the roof collapsed, and then maybe you also take one of these guys, I guess. Then you're still kind of articulating the space by placing a point here that continues the line that you've started to draw with the columns. But at least it looks a little bit more like now your roof has been destroyed. You can kind of tell what's going on there, and you could even do other things like you could take some of these rocks, and maybe these rocks represent rubble. You could scale them a little. I don't know. You could play with this a little bit just to get the sense that things fell apart here a little. And also you could just say it could be, and this is only a block out, so I know I'm not trying to get too artistic with this, but this at least tells the story a little bit of these are chunks of the roof and or pillar that fell down. And regardless of that, you still want to make sure they're kind of friendly for gameplay. So often when when doing rubble, especially when there's less experienced artists sometimes and you're working with as a level designer, you'll find they try to do things very naturalistically, maybe kind of realistically. Like maybe in this image right here, they will actually put rubble along this edge, but maybe this is an area you're using for cover where the player shoots through this gap, and now this rubble's in the way, and they'll think, well, this rubble makes sense that it's here because it fell out of the gap, it fell down to the floor. But you'll say, well, yes, that does make sense, but I need my player to be able to stand, like say they want to put it like here, but you want this to be a cover object because say you put, let's see, if I take a low wall, this kind of thing. This is where you'd start to balance your ruins with some gameplay needs. And I realize in this assignment, this assignment wasn't really about game mechanics outside of you should be able to move the sort of basic assumption that you should be able to move through it pretty comfortably. But if this were like a piece of cover, then you might want to place these like in just a very perfect kind of way so that they don't get in the way of a firefight. Maybe they do something like this. They actually frame a firing position right here like that. And you'd make sure like you'd in your block out didn't put a lot of unnecessary like junk here if you wanted to use that as a firing position or something. And you make sure your artists don't do it and everybody's happy and the player's happy too. Yeah, so that's one thing. So anyway, Edgar had a question. In future projects, can we use other reference images that are similar to the ones that you provided? Would we have to share them to you so we could use them? Let me think about that for a minute. I mean, the reference images are It depends on the assignment specifically. For example, in the first assignment, we were working from the Henri Matisse painting. So in other words, in that case, since it was really based on that particular painting, I would say no. Like I would prefer you guys use that actual reference image. Otherwise, the goals of the assignment get kind of muddy. It becomes harder to find examples to teach you guys with if we start moving on to different images. For ones like this, the ones that I was showing you here, or I believe Josh had also shared some reference images that he was collecting. I mean, those are fine to use as inspiration for things you're building, like I said, to sort of think about how maybe realistic decay patterns would be in the work that you're blocking out. That's okay. Also, last week's assignment used images from very specific locations, such as, let's see if I go back there. The week 2 lecture notes, they were using the Maze Runner slash, there was also a thing from Jean-Pierre Garty-Thronen. I think these were provided for very specific reasons also, in that they had very specific kinds of architecture that was very clean, very monumental. And I think that's the kind of art that was intended to be used for the level design. I think the thing Amelia is trying to get across there is when you're working from concept art and the concept of the assignment is also tied into that art, I don't think we want to separate those things. But there could be cases in the future on a case-by-case basis where we could switch up the concept art a little bit. I didn't really I know one person last week had done, I forget if it was Edgar or not actually, but someone had done some work based on the Blade Runner, right? Let me think about that for a minute. Oh yeah, it was Andy. Okay, yeah. Well, that turned out okay, mainly because the image that he used was so much like the Maze Runner stuff that it didn't really affect anything. But I think we'd have to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. That's the best answer I can give you. Yeah, so, okay, so back to, I want to talk a little bit more. I just dealt with a little bit of destruction, realistic destruction, that kind of thing. I want to talk a little bit about, no problem, actually. This is not quite right. It's bothering me. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about building the structure in its original form, thinking about the architecture in its original form. If I go back to my Pinterest board, there's some examples here, and also if you look at the reference on the Google Drive that Josh posted, that's also helpful. In fact, in one of his images, he drew an outline around what he perceived to be the original shape. That's one way of doing it. It's also okay if like me, you decide you want to alter the original shape a little bit because you're given these blocks, you can do that. The way I've already created more symmetry on this edge of the environment. But on the topic of how it originally was constructed, again, there's a lot of artistic recreations which help you envision things. This is a great one here. Just going to bring up the actual, good, it is. This is a nice reconstruction of a temple in Rome. It allows you to see everything, the inner walls, the outer walls, major columns on the outside, inner columns in here, supporting the inner walls, things like that. That enables you to see, all the geometry that originally contributed to this design. And if we go to, let's see, and just 2D images are very useful. Here is Here's the plan of the Parthenon right there. And this, again, this makes it really clear to you. Like if you can think in this with this kind of clarity about the original layout of your environment, it helps you a lot. Like you can see clearly here that used like major pillars on the complete outside of the temple. It showed you how there was a row of inner walls. It showed you how there were inner columns inside that were smaller that held up the ceiling. It showed you where staircases were. It showed you the whole like breakdown of the whole thing. There's another one. Let's see. Yeah, just I guess I have a lot of them. They're all kind of similar. Um, Temple of Artemis. Again, lots of columns in these. And I brought these up mainly because the architecture prototypes that Amelia provided for us were they were, I mean, they seem to be largely based on a lot of classical kind of architecture, classical Roman and or Greek architecture. But yeah, I pointed this out also in some of the, okay, I guess I already covered that. I was going to say, yeah, the columns usually were the only thing standing with the beams overhead, but I guess I already covered that. This is another great one here showing you artist reconstruction of an ancient environment. Yeah, these are great. If you want to link to my Pinterest board, I think I posted this earlier in the forums, but these kinds of things are really nice. They really just allow you to imagine how everything was set up. Wish I could shrink this a little, but I can't. Not without going back here, I guess. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going to try to build out this temple in its original form. I'm going to delete the work I did here. Okay, I'll turn my snapping back on. We're all set. So if I build this kind of more or less according to one of the original plans, what it means is there's a lot of symmetry going on. Like generally speaking, all these pillars tend to be, oops, they tend to be aligned very specifically. Okay, let's see. And yeah, there's a bit of asymmetry, but not that much because like this edge isn't aligned with this edge, but that's okay. So I'll grab some walls here, work on that. Maybe I make like an entrance here. Actually, I think what I'll do is I'll think a little bit more about how these columns kind of support everything. So again, we talked a little bit about vague to well-articulated spaces. So there's a few different things going on here. If I refer back to the diagram from Amelia's lecture, let's see if I have that here. I do somewhere. There it is. Okay. Yeah. Like how much we disassemble the the structure after we build it determines, how far we are in the spectrum from reinforced to weakened, how far we are to one side or the other. Like obviously the pattern alignment, the rows of columns are very strong. They they create a very strong pattern. The more of those pillars we destroy or weaken, the more that pattern's interfered with. Skeletal structure would be like how much of the overall environment can we cover up? Like if we sort of obscure, like one of the hardest things to obscure and still make obvious what you're building is strangely the floor, probably because the player is standing on it. I feel like that's why at a base level, that's kind of why in the template that Amelia gave to us, she provided like most of the foundation was still built into the map for us to start with. If we start deleting that, it becomes tricky. It becomes really hard to see where the spaces were and differentiate them from each other. Like there were some levels where I would see in the recent assignment, there might be like one of these would be over here and it would be kind of like this by itself. And I'd say like, I don't really know why this is here. Like it doesn't really seem to be aligning to everything. I mean, it's far-fetched. I mean, in reality, it could have been carried there by someone, but that's not a kind of story that would be of interest to us when we try to block out our level. So it just becomes a little unclear. So that's the sort of I feel like with only a limited number of these pieces to use, you probably don't want to waste them on sort of like random debris like that. If you want to do that, you might want to use the rocks, but even the rocks can really, I think a lot of people didn't really use the rocks that much except for random pieces of debris scattered about their landscape. But it can be used pretty well to articulate the spaces as well. Most people use them kind of as set dressing, like kind of decoration, really. It's not necessarily bad. It's just, if, like I said, if you only have so many pieces to build out your space, you should, it serves you the best to think about the number of ways that you can make them work for you. Like maybe this was a building here and this is actually a courtyard inside. If we say that's what it is. Whoa. Okay. No. Outline it this way. Okay. I'm trying not to get too fussy with this as I go. So I just want to try to get the broad strokes of this in. Okay, we would have a ceiling on this. And as always, if you guys have any questions while I'm working, please feel free to interrupt me, even if it's not, you know, like directly related to what I'm doing at the moment. That's fine. Just don't feel afraid to ask. All right, so oh, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, maybe I'll make these like low walls like that. Okay, let's see. Hmm. Okay, if that's 0.5, I'll move this back a little. Oh, you had trouble with the brown beams. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not even sure, like, what were they? I forget, did she just name them beams? Wood beam. Yeah, I think it was, I believe, that's a really, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because my feeling about that was she mentioned a little bit in the assignment description. I'm going to go back to it and read this here. She said, think about the original layout of the temple. How was it logically arranged? Where was the main entrance? What was the purpose to each space? And how did people's path flow through it? How has it decayed and possibly be used by others over time? I think that's your clue right there. It's like saying that someone later came in and set something up with the brown beams. It's the same with the brown squares, which are, she named them 1 meter cover. The brown squares also kind of represent something that someone might have moved into later and um, rebuilt the area a little bit. So yeah, we'll and honestly, that's the stuff that you can use. Like, say you want to create something in your layout, but you don't want to. You feel like maybe you can't justify it as part of the ruins, but you want it anyway. If that makes sense. Um, I would probably that's where I'd probably use those pieces. Like before, I talked a little bit about, like, say you wanted, I mean, it's tricky because they're only beams, but say you wanted to articulate a volume, like regardless of the way the ruin would have been, you want to sort of articulate a certain space. Um, maybe the fiction is that that someone came in later and kind of tried to rebuild it, or maybe I don't know, or they just they did something to reinforce the structure. Maybe even that could be something as well. Well, let me do it that way. Okay. But yeah, I think that's pretty much how those pieces have to be used. Sorry, my scale's a little bit crazy here. Thought it was better than it was, but it's not. Okay, I guess I can. Maybe we'll just do that. Yeah, why not? And maybe I just take a little more liberty with this. Let's see. For reasons, I don't know. This might be getting a little too much. Okay. So we have a little bit of something going on here. It kind of works. And then we say maybe this is, like I said, this was kind of a plaza outside. I mean, it is tricky. This, interestingly enough, this low wall right here ends up kind of like controlling a lot of what you do logically. Like, in fact, I see this now and I think, okay, I guess I have to move this here to match it, kind of. You know, it's a little odd that way. Kind of constricts me a little bit. But at least now it kind of lines up. It's thicker, yes, but whatever, that doesn't really matter. Okay, so it's 1.111. Okay. So yeah, we could kind of imagine this like that. Like I said, maybe this is more of a courtyard. Maybe it's not really a, it's not a giant interior, perhaps. That's something we could picture like as a reasonable thing to assume. Maybe just make one giant protective wall back here. Okay, so we zoom out, we see, you know, this already looks like a fairly plausible structure. Like, it's not perfect by any means. In fact, I already see now like this wall back here is kind of making this awkward off to the side, but we can accommodate that. It's not the end of the world. There's probably a little bit of fudging room if you're doing ruins. Like, say for some reason your gameplay needs this side to be a little wider than the other side. You know, I'm sure if you step back and look at a lot of gameplay environments, you'll see that for the most part they seem to be based in reality. But if you step back, you realize like that's not quite right. I remember when the Dishonored games came out, like I really did enjoy their environments, the sort of the way you could kind of roam around in the streets. But if you look at the scale of them, the scale was very odd. Like if you kind of mentally step back and look at them from like this distance, you saw a lot of strange things. That they were set up kind of to be stealth sandboxes that were like they were painted almost like visually painted to look like streets in sort of a Victorian town or something, but they weren't really. Okay, so here's sort of like a fairly plausible structure. Let's do one last bit of detail. Let's pretend there's like a shrine. Back here in the center. Honestly, like I know there's these differences in height, but this could even be explained by like if you wanted to, you could even say erosion caused the foundations to crack and like separate, raise or lower, because that's a possible thing over 2,000 years. I think we could agree that's totally possible. Oops, let's see. Yeah, okay, so we do something like that. Something like that. I'm going to duplicate both these at the same time to maintain the symmetry as best we can. Then maybe I say that there is a let's see. Maybe I'll space these out a little more. Okay. Boo, my wall was not quite, okay. That's okay. All right, so we do that, and I guess to make it more painfully accurate, we just do a little of this too, and then we give it a roof. And say maybe there was something important that normally happened in there. Yes, that's a pretty good basis, I feel like. So when we deconstruct this, we have some options. I guess this can be a little wider. Sorry, my OCD is kicking in here. Okay, so we want to deconstruct this, but we want it to still be apparent what's going on. So maybe I'll save this as a new for before and after later. We'll just do that. Right, okay. So we want this to still be kind of apparent. So we could like delete the roof. Because like I said, the roof probably wouldn't be standing. Let's see if I grab some of these ruined columns here. I think what I'll do is I'm going to use, previously I gave you guys, or I posted a link, I think, to this replace with prefab plugin that someone made for Unity, which works to some degree, I guess. What it allows you to do is, let me see if I find a ruined column. Yeah, you can quickly like do that and replace prefabs like that in exactly the same position. So in other words, I could just, I could go through here. I could just replace all these guys with, although the really weird thing that I don't like, and I don't even know why, is if you see like, I don't really understand how this works, but this may be a drawback now that I see it. It looks like in the hierarchy window, objects in blue these are actual prefabs with the proper properties in the inspector. But like when I click on the ones I replaced with the prefab, it seems like it's missing a field. What is it missing? Yeah, like its class is different. Like suddenly up here, it doesn't have things like model, open, select, overrides. I don't even know why that's there. So I guess what can I say about that? I don't know. It seemed to do the job for me though. I'm not really sure why it replaces things like that. Anyway, bigger point I'm trying to make though is we're now like ripping things apart, but we're still kind of articulating, that there was a space here at one point. We can also go, we can replace like parts of the archways we find important. We can leave there. Let's see how we can do this. Like say if I delete this. Say we want to keep this arch intact. We like how that looks. We like the story it tells. We feel like it's an important part of the structure to remain standing. So we could kind of do that. Then we could also to sort of frame it, say we find it important to keep it framed with like these columns. We could even like leave this here to tell that story. And then we could kind of knock out these guys too and put these back to the broken columns like that. And over here, where it overhangs isn't important. We could shrink this up. That's not what I wanted. Let's see. So we want to maintain a little bit of this. We could try doing something like say this is still kind of standing. Then maybe we say like, if we try to do some kind of more realistic or fairly realistic kind of deconstruction, we could say that most of the ceiling would have collapsed, but the corner is the strongest part architecturally of something. So maybe there's a little bit of corner remaining. Let's try that again. Okay. Okay. I'm going to, just to be fussy here, I'm going to knock my snap value down a little bit more. Say for some reason we like this corner a lot. We want to keep it very strong. Let's see. One of these. Hmm. And we just sort of leave it, like give it a nice silhouette like that. And we still kind of maintain that corner, but we can see how it fell apart. Let's see if we delete this. We kept this one arch. These low walls are pretty sturdy, like they might not have fallen at all actually. But if we want them to, we could knock them down even more. Actually, no, let's leave them for the most part. Let's say like this suffered a lot more damage over here. Oof, sorry, I hit my search field. Okay. Yeah, let's say this is still standing like this. But maybe less strong. Yeah, why not? Let's say that this is much more ruined here, kind of. And you could even do something like that. And then we knock these guys all the way back down to there. These pieces are pretty useful. These low pieces, like this here. So we could, if you want to maintain this idea that this was like really, although I don't know, frankly, I'm more inclined just to kind of do this. But it tells the story anyway of, we could just knock that down to nothing and say that, you know, we just knock out as much as we can, and but we still tell the story. I think like, um, so in other words, leaving like this corner, I realize this is floating, so it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but no, it is. Now it's the prettiest thing in the world. Okay, right here, if we leave this on the corner, it sort of, it helps tell that this was the corner of the foundation of this building, but like this isn't as important. And it also, if you free that up, it also starts to create almost like a little space in through there. But if you didn't want the space through there, we could use our rocks here to sort of tell the story um, of how this thing fell apart and really crumbled in some areas, even more than others. This is where these can become handy. So yeah, maybe you don't actually want the player to go through here, but you want to be able to see through here. And you just sort of do this a little bit. Oops. All right. I think that kind of tells the story pretty nicely. And then, yeah, again, we can delete even more here and there. We can say like, we don't really need to see that. And we don't need, say, all these columns. Maybe we delete a few more. Give it kind of a random frequency. That kind of works. And we can put even more of these little, like if we want to just into this a little more, we can leave a rock here and there and say like, okay, well that that column really got worn down to a nub over the years. Could even do that. Oops. That still works. Yeah, and back here we could go back and we could leave this low wall that was originally here anyway as part of the template we were given. This here could become, again, we could really just knock this way down. In fact, we could only have it emerge here from the dirt that kind of poured in later. We could leave like little remnants of the line that align here with this. Like we could leave like part of it like that. And we could leave part of it. I often just use primitives like when I'm working. So even shapes like this, which are like, they're not really a rectangle, they have an angle in them. Like I often wouldn't even use them. I just sort of, I would honestly just kind of cobble them together like I'm doing here, where I just kind of move things around. So they kind of do what I want. I make them kind of do what I want. So, okay, we get the idea here. This corner piece, we can do even more. We can keep on shrinking this. In fact, let's, I like that idea of this like foundational chunk remaining like that. You can see how like this now draws a line to this corner. And you can tell there definitely was a corner here of the whole complex. So we could add in some more bits of junk here in the corner, more bits of rubble to help reinforce that narrative. Just a few touches. So again, with this, if we leave, since we see like the most iconic thing to sort of leave in place that helps convey what we're trying to convey is this sort of supported beam overhead. We can go with that. That always helps articulate sort of the entrance to the space as well as like kind of the edges of the volume as well. At least the front edge as you face it, if you want to consider this a facade. In fact, let's like to make this a little more interesting. Let's just knock one of these down. Try to create a sense of like, I don't know how you, it's sort of a weird concept, but like symmetrical asymmetry almost, or vice versa. I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know, like say you want this to be more important, so you leave more columns up here. Maybe you only knock down a couple more. But maybe you keep trying to use this a little more, let's say. And again, I'm not, just so you know, like obviously I'm not using the exact amount over here. But what you'd have to do is you'd have to say like, if this is the amount of destruction, if this is sort of being used to approximate the amount of remaining geometry that's left over, you know, then you obviously adjust your goals as necessary. But yeah, this is like a really big wall. Yeah, let's leave it. let's just say you need this for occlusion, like you don't want the player to see back there, so you leave a pretty big wall and they're still standing. So about the brown pieces. So the brown pieces, how can we use them? I mean, they may or may not be that interesting to you. They might even be worth like just sort of cluing the player where you want them to go. Like they might even be something like, maybe they were placed there like that, or maybe, let's see what's a more interesting thing we could do. Well, maybe they just, like, because maybe the player can't easily reach this, maybe. Maybe they were placed later like that. And then now it became like a ramp that led up into the space. That could be a thing, I guess. Let's see. We play this a little bit. Yeah, it could now look like they were placed there by someone later on, although, God, really? I can't even cross that. All right, but now we move around and we see, like, we can still get a sense of what this building was, but we left just enough standing here and there to tell us how much decay happened over the years. Uh, Also say like this little shrine in the back in this plaza, maybe this was important. So, we go back and we use all these cover objects, which are kind of like, what's funny is I approximate these like after playing Uncharted 4, I put these in the category of, you're in a combat space fighting the private militia, and the militia moved in, ammunition and equipment and all this stuff into ruins, and that's why these boxes are here. That's what this box is to me. Um, but yeah, it could suddenly be like this is a combat space and you need to do things like block exits and entrances, provide like, areas to fight from. So suddenly it makes it look like you need objects that like are in very specific places and they don't necessarily mesh with the the hierarchical reality of the space. So you suddenly have to like plan out things like this about where your cover would be when you're in a firefight. So you start doing things like this. Let's see, maybe here too. Say maybe one group is fighting in the. This will come up later. We have a later assignment a few weeks from now about combat, but this will come up. So you might suddenly say like your threat vector is you come in this way, and you need a place to run and jump to cover, so you can fight there. You can push forward and fight from there, or maybe you want to move up even closer. So you place it kind of out there, and the player can now run up and do that. Yeah, I think that's the best way I can convey about how those things might be used. But it also sort of like, at least here, I've used it a little bit to reinforce the volume by placing them at edges. You could do the same thing here, like say you want to reinforce this edge for some reason. You could just do the same thing and place it like along an edge like this. And maybe, let's see, maybe I can use this again, one of the beams. Because I want to convey, I want to convey that there's a path through here, kind of. So I could place it like this on an edge and have it kind of reinforce this space right here, where I create kind of a new volume out of that. Yeah, so I guess that's about it. I just wanted to try to show you the thought process I go through and some of the ways you can think about the sort of the overall volumes you're creating, and then the sort of way you can deconstruct them down to a micro level from a macro level. Okay, I guess if there's no other questions, I'm probably going to sign off. Hope that was useful to you guys. You're welcome. Okay. All right. Have a good week, and I will talk to you again next Sunday. Bye-bye.